Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the one and only award-winning Let's Talk America with host Sheena Thornton podcast radio programming. And of course, we highlight the best and the brightest and some of the most fascinating people you want to know more about, and also the topics they cover that they advocate for. And tonight is no exception. I am so excited to have the one and only licensed professional counselor Karen King is on with us tonight, giving a virtual clap. And we're going to talk about all things mental and emotional health, but as much as we can over the next 30 to 45 minutes. But we're going to truly focus on changing family dynamics. And it's an interesting topic that many people encounter. Most people don't have, I guess, the thought, really, the conscious thought, if you will, Karen, to really horn in on it. But tonight we're going to talk about all things mental and emotional health concerning to changing family dynamics. And you may be asking, what exactly does that mean? That means that you once had a 3-year-old little girl who doted on you, and now she's 13 and wants to have nothing to do with you. What does that mean? That also means that you and your significant other or spouse started off perhaps over 15, 25 years ago. Maybe you started off with kids. Maybe you came in with a blended family and the dynamics were one way, and you looked up and 10 years later, it was another. Okay, someone has a new job, a new career, more health issues have come on board. And speaking of health, we're also going to focus and highlight the fact that all of us have aging parents. So we're aging gracefully, Karen. Our parents are aging as well, and that can be a tough subject for many. What does that look like? And we do know that obviously the baby boomers, if you're a Generation Xer like myself and Karen, or if you're younger, obviously you know baby boomers are your parents and grandparents. But we also know they are aging at a very rapid pace, so much so that there's talk that the healthcare industry cannot even keep up. And what comes with aging? Obviously physical ailments and also some mental and emotional ailments as well. We're going to talk about perhaps the impact as memory loss and dementia and Alzheimer's come with our aging parents. And that changes the dynamics of so much as well, because perhaps you depended on that parent to give you so much advice, and now those roles have changed. Karen, we've got a lot to talk about in the next 30 to 45 minutes, and we're going to be taking your questions, everyone. So let's get those questions started. But Karen, we have a wonderful tradition, I think, here on Let's Talk America with host Shana Thornton, where we ask our exclusive guests to tell us what really drove them to get where they are today. You're an acclaimed, well-respected therapist. You speak and help many people of all ages. I know that. So tell us what got you to where you are. Why is Karen a therapist? What made her go into therapy?
Well, Karen King is a therapist, not by choice,
Okay.
but by calling. And what I mean by that is that when it was time for me to go to grad school, I was looking for everything else, occupational therapy, like coaching, all the different things. And I was drawn to this one particular school, and I had all of these requirements things that I was not going to do. And this school met all of them. And it just so happened to be the counseling program. And
Nice.
so as I was applying for it, I was reminded from when I was 11 years old that my mom told me that I would make an excellent counselor for people when I
Wow.
grew up. Yeah, yeah. That was what popped into my mind. And so at 11, I'm like, who want to sit down and listen to people problems all day? But when I tell you that there is nothing else in this world I would rather do
Yeah.
than sit down and help people untangle the webs that have been passed down to us that we have
Yeah.
unknowingly stepped in, and some just really don't know how to get out of them.
Yeah.
And so now it's a major passion of mine, to sit with people and help them figure things out.
Yeah, I love that, Karen. So excited to have you on. Of course, you practice family therapy in Atlanta metro market. We're going to talk more about your specific practice and location very soon. I do want to remind everyone that's watching us, first off, let everyone know that we're talking therapy. We're talking about some very helpful mental and emotional concerns dealing with changing family dynamics. Again, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, we're talking about things that really impact all of us as our child ages. Maybe they were once a teenager and now we're looking at a 21-year-old and we're not quite sure where we fit in their life. If you're talking about aging parents, your relationship with your sister has changed. You once were super close and now you don't talk as much, perhaps because she lives in San Francisco and you're in Houston, Texas. Whatever the reason we want to get to the bottom of it. Also, give your feedback, your comments, your thoughts, things that have helped you along the way as you've coped with different things in life as the family dynamics have changed. Okay. So we have Karen King on with us, and we want your questions now. Karen, you mentioned something that I've got to start off with. And
Mhm.
you said one of the reasons you became it, your mom reminded you, would tell you how great you were as a kid, and you'd be a great therapist. And you mentioned the buzzword of saying all the things we inherited, right?
Yeah.
And I want to touch on that, because before we talk about individuals being able to help themselves cope through something, often, and you tell me this, I've had the opportunity to sit with a lot of people, and
Mhm.
some of those people had some childhood trauma, and they've always said, and therapists like yourself and psychologists and psychiatrists have said that at some point people have to revisit, to touch on it, to address it in some way. And I know when a lot of people hear the word revisit, that can trigger some things in people depending on what happened to them. And I know there's some professionals, and it may vary for some, but think there's a point to do it and there's a point to move on and progress as well. But tell us how important it is for there needs to be some sort of healing taking place among individuals when they address the broken relationship with the sister, the tense relationship with dad, right? The
Yeah.
relationship with a maybe perhaps a dismissive mother, things that we say, hey, you're going to address now that you're 39 years old. And the
Mhm.
reality is you felt all of your life, perhaps, that your mother dismissed your opinion of a family of five. Help us out.
Yes. So one thing that I will say is that, we have expectations of people,
Yes.
and we are expecting ourselves from others,
Yes. That's
which is a royal setup, because no two people have the same life experience.
no.
So when you're looking at a family dynamic, there are so many different characteristics, traits. There are things that are passed down genetically. There are things that are passed down emotionally, like characteristics, different things like that. And so you really don't know who's getting what from where in the bloodline. I am a trauma therapist, and
Okay.
science or research has shown that trauma can be passed down from 7 generations.
Wow.
If you think about
Wow.
mom's side has 7 generations back, dad's side 7 generations back. That's 14 generations that you have been cherry picked these different personality traits, emotions, and different things like that. So, although you're coming from the same family, you're showing up differently. Facial features may be the same, but the way you're built on the inside, emotionally, psychologically, it is different. And so, one of the things that I encourage is to check in with yourself. We all have emotional disturbances. And
Yes.
so, when you're angry with somebody, it's not necessarily that they're not meeting a need for you, it's that you're missing that you're equipped to meet your own need.
That's right.
And so we put that
Powerful.
responsibility on other people, and we get upset with them for not being us back to us.
Powerful.
Okay.
Powerful.
And so when we take the lead and understand that an emotional disturbance within us can be something that was passed down, or it could really be something that is relevant to your nucleus family, your family of origin, where you grew up. You
Wow.
still have to take that responsibility and say, hey, I know my family didn't meet that need.
Okay.
So now it's my turn to step in and make sure that that's met.
Wow. You touched on so much in what you just said over the last minute, Karen. And again, we're talking about your emotional and mental health as family relationships change.
Yeah.
And don't say, well, nothing's changed. Of course it has, right? And that's naive to think it. Your child who once came into your arms as a beautiful bundle of joy may
Correct.
happen to be 21 years old now.
Yes.
So they had to change your
Yes.
expectations, even some disappointments. We live long enough, our children, everyone would disappoint us, even if they intended to or not, Karen. We're going to talk about that. But
Yeah.
I love the fact of what you said. You said that it's a lot of it is family dynamics, and I was not aware of the a lot of times the science genetic base disposition that goes with it. But I'll say this, if I have my mother's eyes and my father's cheekbones,
Yes.
perhaps there are other things that come with that as well. And we'll touch on
Mhm.
this, but there are people that have some major depression, right? Disorders that do exist, some personality disorders, some things that also may be genetically linked. And if we go to the physician and they often say, what's your background dealing with breast cancer? What
Mhm.
is it dealing with heart disease, type 2 diabetes, right?
Yeah.
We make that connection. But I think there are a lot of individuals that don't come from the mental health world like yourself who
Mhm.
say, well, that's diabetes, that's obesity, that may be lupus, that has nothing to do with perhaps the severe anxiety they're suffering through, the
Yeah.
panic attacks that they're going through,
Yeah.
right? The major depression they're going through. So does the science also back that up? That doesn't, and I want to be clear, by no means am I saying that because someone's mother had major depression, that child is automatic. But you do believe, as a trained professional, Karen, that that child needs to likely grow up and be aware of what mental concerns do exist in the family?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because some of the behaviors are learned.
Okay.
So there are a lot of people who are in homes with parents or siblings who have a clinical diagnosis that have never been diagnosed, and then the behaviors are trickled down to the children. When I was working with an agency, I was working with a mom that was diagnosed with bipolar 2 and schizophrenia.
Okay.
And so we were treating the children as well. And so the children were showing up in the classroom, they were showing up on the bus, like in the community, different places, with the behaviors that the mother was exhibiting because she was not receiving treatment.
Right.
And so they were wanting to diagnose the children, but when we went in and did, a thorough evaluation and assessment, and realized it's not a chemical imbalance in the children, they've learned this behavior. So it's both. So it can be genetic and it can be learned.
And that's such a valid point. And you're right, because there's some behavior concerns that exist. And I've heard social workers in the school system or school psychologists say there can be major difference between behavior concerns and mental concerns.
Yes.
And that's so key. And the reason why, to me, what you're saying is logical is because we learn how to behave, right, from the household we're in. And I've always said this, having the opportunity to sit with people, some who came from some very traumatic backgrounds.
Mhm.
Your normal may be different from my normal, right?
Correct.
If I'm teaching my children that you eat cold spaghetti every day, that's not shocking to them, but your kids are
Right.
going to say that's weird, right? And
Correct.
so that's a very powerful point, even social cues or
Mhm.
how they're behaving, because perhaps they see mom or dad behave in that way, even if it is a chemical disorder in mom, a mental disorder where there's things she just can't help, right?
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct. Absolutely.
What powerful information. You're watching the award-winning Let's Talk America with Hoshana Thornton podcast radio. We are talking all things mental and emotional health with a very acclaimed family therapist. She is a dear friend of the show. This is her debut on the show, but we've talked for months about bringing her on. Super excited. She did appear at our Women's Empowerment Talk, and she was a huge hit on really talking about some real life things. So I said, we've got to bring her on. And what are we going to talk about? Changing family dynamics.
Mhm.
And that's so key. Before I go on, I do want to shout out to all of our listeners. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, Miss J, from watching out of Atlanta. She says, hey, Latrina out of Atlanta Metro says, wow, 7 generations. You know how interesting and intriguing, and I'm going to say as a human, a little scary that is, Karen. The
Mhm.
reality is we don't know our ancestors or our family members 7 generations back. So I've
Mhm.
heard many friends, great friends of mine who are educated, but they will naively say that doesn't run in our family.
Mhm.
Right. And
Mhm.
in my thinking, and I say this even if you knew your grandmother, right?
Mhm.
Very close to my grandmother. She was instrumental in my life, one of my favorite people ever. But the reality is, I can't tell you what my grandmother went through when she was a small child
Right.
because she didn't share and talk about it,
Correct.
right? And
Correct.
if you're like a lot of people in the world, I don't care if you're in America or Nigeria or you are in Puerto Rico, we know that older generations or previous generations often could be private, Karen,
Correct.
right? So
Yes.
the trauma or the issues or the anxiety or the depression
Yes.
or the personality disorders that may have existed, they were hush hush about because you
Yes.
didn't tell people your family business.
Correct.
Oh, Or Karen, and tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, they didn't even know how to diagnose and what it was.
Right. Right. Because I think about now, when people hear voices, right? 60, 70 years ago, they were just called crazy. Oh, so and so is crazy, right? But now we know that that's schizophrenia. So there is a language to everything. And it's important that we engage ourselves and get the information out to people so that they
Beautiful.
can actually have language to go with their life. And that language brings understanding.
Beautiful. And also, would you agree, Karen, as an expert yourself, a family therapist, diagnosing or being aware of proper terminology and not street urban slang, and we're all guilty of it, right? Where we'll say, they're acting out of it, that
Mhm.
do you think that could take away some of the shame or the stigma that someone say, I don't feel right and I need to go to the doctor, but it doesn't help when your sister says, why are you acting crazy?
Right. Absolutely. I will agree 100% with that. Because we are very proud people.
Yeah.
And so to have someone to critique you or criticize you or shame you when you're being vulnerable, I find that in a lot of families too, is that we don't know how to be vulnerable with each other.
That's a good point.
So we don't want our information. What goes on in this house stays in this house, right?
Yeah.
A lot of us grew up with that. And then so we grow up not knowing how to cope or even ask for the help that we need. We're
Wow.
shamed for it.
Powerful. I once knew a young lady who had suffered from some very severe postpartum
Mhm,
depression. And she had shared with me many years ago that she was open to her mom about it, about what had happened. And her
mhm,
and her mother were living together. And her mother was a very sweet, supportive woman, majority of this acquaintance life. But she told me when she told her mom about not feeling herself and feeling different after
mhm,
giving birth to this child, her mother said, you don't need to go to the doctor, just pray about it. And
mhm.
as a person of faith, Karen, I know you are too, that faith and therapy are not at odds. And, and,
Correct.
and, and I think that is so important. If you would elaborate on that, because I think that perhaps keeps some older generations or people that are heavily influenced by perhaps the older generation from getting the help they have, because as if you go see a physician and talk about what's going on, as somehow is questioning your level of faith. Help
Yeah.
us out.
So I'll tell you this, the Holy Spirit is the comforter, right? And so if we are operating within the Holy Spirit, then we are going to have the wisdom and the intellect and the knowledge to be able to share with you the things that are going on to help you get yourself in a better position. And if you think about most of the ministry or a lot of the ministry was actually addressing the emotional
That's
issues that were going on with people. So to have faith and therapy, that makes you a whole person.
right. It's true. And what a great point to bring out, because I think when you don't put the word on there that they're connected, that they're talking about the emotions, right?
Yes,
Then it's easy to overlook it. But now, and we have so many tools at our fingertips that they did not have in
yes,
previous generations. And let's be real, to some degree, there's a level of mistrust with some of the older generations and the internet now, right? They
correct.
did be on Facebook, but there's a mistrust, and rightfully so. There's some erroneous information out there. But when I think of the Holy Bible, and now you can go to any search engine and say, give me scripture that supports me not being fearful. Give
Yes,
me scripture which gives me not being anxious, right? To your point, we clearly see a lot of the daily or human emotions are tied to what the Bible is addressing. So
yes.
great point. I do want to get to our questions because this is your show,
Okay.
everybody. So get the questions, get the comments in. How many of you ever said, if I can pinpoint and corner a family therapist, I would ask her, this is your chance right now on Let's Talk America with O'Shana Thornton Radio Show. I have the pleasure and honor of speaking with someone that is super amazing and has worked with a lot of people. Karen King is on with us right now. She's a family therapist. I want to say, Dr. Hamilton, thank you for watching us out of Atlanta. And she says, wow, I think she was referencing the 7 generations and things being tied to that behavior. Latrina out of Atlanta says, learn behavior or chemical imbalance. That's good. And that's a very good point. Would
Mhm.
probably help educators or those in the school system, Karen, right? To
Yes.
make sure that child's getting diagnosed properly
Correct.
and not being put, perhaps, and nothing wrong with being on medication, right? I'm sure you would say that if that's what's needed. But if that's not what's needed and it's learned behavior, making
Correct.
sure we're addressing it appropriately, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's so key, because when you think about it, for children that do have a guardian that may not be emotional or mental stable, which is probably more than we're willing to admit, right,
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
They may not have the proper advocacy for that child set in place, because perhaps mom, dad, or grandma, or granddad who's trying to care for them, or auntie, is
Hmm.
trying to cope herself with her concerns. Is that
Correct.
fair?
It is. It is. And a lot of them um don't have access. You know, even though there are all these platforms and you can do telehealth and you can do all the things, knowledge or wisdom is learned,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
the access that is available, if you're not introduced to it, then you don't have access to the resources.
Correct.
And
Correct.
then so when you go into a school and you're doing the best that you can, and then the authority figures in the school are coming, they're talking about the behavior of the child, that is a reflection on the parent,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So sometimes they can take it that way. And
Yes.
so when the offense shows up, then the brain is automatically shut off from processing or even being able to understand, because they've gotten into the emotion center of the brain. So I'll give y'all this little picture that I learned. So if you make a fist, right? Right here is your prefrontal cortex. It's right here. It's where you
Okay.
think, where you plan, you rationalize, you organize, you do all the things. And then if you open your hand, right in the center is your limbic system. That's the emotion center of your brain. And then there is a little pea-sized something called an amygdala that sits right in the limbic system, which is your practical life experience that engages with the historical emotional center of your brain. So we are calm and cool and collected. We are planning. We got all the things lined up the way we think it should go.
Mm,
And then when something doesn't turn out like we do,
that's right.
we flip our lid, right? So that means that we are led by emotions and our logical, rational thinking mind has gone out the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's where some of the learned behavior comes from, is because we don't have the coping skills to stay engaged, to learn how to regulate.
Good point. Good, very good point. And leads us to our next question by Deborah out of Atlanta Metro. Thank you so much. She asked a very good question. She first says, different normals per family. What is normal, Doc? Great question.
Let me tell you something. That word is erased in my office. I'm just going to be honest. I'm like, what is normal? Tell me what normal is, because everybody has a different lived experience.
Yes.
So when you come in with your lived experience, it's not my place to judge you. It's not my place to tell you that that's right or wrong. I am here to support you to find out what has worked for you in the past and what is problematic for you. Because what may be problematic for me is coming from my home of origin, which is not problematic for you. And while I'm speaking on it, I want to share this. When we are in relationships, whether it is platonic, whether it's professional, whether it is romantic, um, when our view of normal doesn't show up, then we start trying to fix ourselves in the other person. And that's why we feel so depleted, not realizing that the love that we're giving away is for us to do the work to heal us so that we can show up whole.
Beautiful.
And then so our wholeness is what our normal is. Because
Correct.
we're not lashing out, we're not accusing, we're not blaming, we're not putting
Beautiful.
the responsibility on our external environment to either keep us safe or make us feel loved or accepted or heard
Mhm.
or validated. Like
Yeah.
those are in addition to you providing those things for yourself.
Yeah, so powerful. You said something earlier. You said that when people have grown up and perhaps in, I'm going to say this normal, abnormal dysfunction, what they lack, they may try to push onto others, right? And
Correct.
such a great point. My best friend is supposed to be a dumping ground for all of my emotional trauma.
Hmm.
This man or woman that I've gotten involved with,
Yes.
they're to take everything, and he or she is supposed to know how to process. And
Hmm.
and you've got a great point. That's not to say that friends or romantic interests or spouses do not justifiably disappoint us, right? You live long enough, somebody will, if they do mean to or not. And that goes double for our children, right?
Yeah.
They may not go the path you thought. They may have made some major mistakes in their life. But at the end of the day, I do often wonder when I, as a people observer and a lover of people, Karen, are they putting all those expectations and all of those failures and all of those disappointments on the next guy they're dating, on the next woman he's involved with? Things that just aren't fair because perhaps there's mommy issues from
Yeah.
55 years ago where mom made promises to get something and she never did. Maybe
Right.
mom made promises to leave the abusive boyfriend that was in and out the house and she never did. And
Right.
he's distrustful of and I'm not going to try to water this down, right? But mom tends to be the most important person in a boy's life, right? We can all admit that for the most part. But if he finds a flaw in her, and all parents are flawed. I love, it's my most important role, but we're all flawed to some
Right.
degree in it. But if it's a habitual one that's a true level of dysfunction, how does he see women 30 years later or 25 years later? Because the woman he loved the most, right, who everything goes into, kept disappointing him. Am I being unfair, or is that probable?
You're not. That is 100% true. And like you said at the beginning of the show, these are the childhood traumas and issues that were not resolved. So they show up later in life. Like you reap a harvest of what seed was planted that was not resolved growing up. And so if you're not taught coping skills, if you're not taught
Beautiful.
how to pull away and care for yourself when you're agitated or when you're aggravated, if you don't listen to your body when it talks to you, that's the biggest thing that I've learned is teaching clients how to listen to their body. We always have warning signs. And if you can recognize your warning signs, then you can pull away and do a backwards look at things and work to the root of that so that you can then go to therapy, because a lot of times we need a therapist, because our best thinking gets us in our traps every time. Whatever the situation is, our best thinking has us there. So there is no harm in reaching out and getting another opinion.
Yeah. So key. Such an important conversation. I love this. We're going to get to your questions and comments. Stacy out of Atlanta says, good evening, everyone. Stacy, thanks for watching and being on with us. I'm going to go on to the next statement. Janine Holt Harris says, you can't change what you don't know. Good stuff. I love that. That is so key. Speaking of good stuff, before we go into our next question and comment from our chat, and we love it. You all are on tonight and we love it. Keep the questions going. Text somebody, send them the live link. Let them know that we've got an acclaimed family therapist on and she's answering those questions. Friendly reminder from my perspective as a professional, I do want to let you know that this is for general education and awareness only. For more specific concerns about your own emotional and mental needs, of course, we're going to encourage you to see your own family therapist or personal therapist wherever you are. If it's in DC, Columbia, South Carolina, or in Atlanta Metro, go check out yourself and take care of yourself. Karen, quick question, talking about emotional and mental health, changing family dynamics, dealing with the past and trauma, right? And people have a life. Nobody's family is perfect. You can be from a loving home, but there still was some bumps in the road, or maybe you didn't feel seen or heard because you were one of 8 kids, right? And things were tough. Cheaper by the dozen. The movie makes it look great, but to some degree, Marsha from the Brady Bunch is a reality perhaps for children who are in families with lots of children or not. But I've got to ask this. You said people have to learn to cope. Really quick before we go on to our next question from our awesome live audience watching us on Facebook and YouTube. Hello to our YouTube family. Love you all too in our Facebook family. What is a quick thing to cope, to work with? I hear people say they like walking or take 3 deep breaths. As a family therapist, what have you found to be helpful for some people?
I would say that the biggest thing is to just pause.
Okay.
You have to take the pause. Because if you continue to press the gas pedal, I give this analogy all the time. If you were in a situation or a relationship where the pedal is just pressed to the floor all the time, you eventually run out of gas, but you're still trying to white knuckle through. So, and you're looking for a response from someone else.
Yeah.
So if you pause, it gives you a moment to pull back, right? to do that check in with yourself. I always start with checking in with self. Like I may have an issue with somebody else, but I have to look at what I'm bringing to the
That's
table
right.
too, because it's not
That's right.
always somebody else's fault.
I
And if
love it.
if all of my relationships have static in it or some kind of discord, we have to
Valid.
look at what the common denominator is.
That's correct. That
And
is such a great point. And that doesn't mean that, I mean, you go through life, you're going to meet people that are going to be dramatic, toxic, and maybe it's you, whatever. It doesn't matter. We all got our stuff. But you are right. If you're always getting into it with people, you can't say, people just test me. This is what, Libras do. This is what Tauruses do. And we all have fun, right? Seeing those funny memes out there on social media. But on a serious tip, if you're always getting into it with people, you're going to have to look at yourself. And that doesn't mean people don't get into it with people, right? Of course, we have disagreements with the love of our lives, with children, with managers at the job. But there's something called respectful, right? And you tell me this, speaking with so many therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists over the years on programming, that there's a healthy way to disagree. And just because you disagree does not need to be a meltdown with every disagreement. Would you say that's not the healthiest thing to do, Karen?
I would agree 100%. And again, we're bringing our learned patterns of behavior into every relationship, right? So you may have seen mom stonewall dad, like just completely stop talking to him and for weeks.
Right. Good
So
point.
you're learning how to be in relationship with people watching that dynamic.
That's a good point.
So the thing is like you said earlier, if you don't know, then you don't know to get help. And a key indicator is that if all or the majority of your relationships are turbulent, then that's a place to pause,
Correct.
right? And then ask someone who's really close to you an honest question. Be like, you know what, friend? I'm realizing, X, Y, and Z. Like I'm picking the same kind of guys, like
Yeah.
I'm getting the same kind of girls. We are having these seemingly petty arguments. Do you think I need to go to therapy? That is an honest question to ask. And with that question being asked, it allows you to do that self-reflection. Uh-oh. I think it's frozen. Mm.
Hi, Karen. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Got it. Thank you. Had a technical difficulty. Thank you, everyone, for
Okay.
staying with us. What a great show. We're going to keep this party going. So go ahead, and you were finishing your point.
I'm gonna tell you, I don't remember what my point was.
Well, that's okay. We are going to go right back in. Thank you, everyone, for letting us know about the freezing of the programming too. We thank you for all the messages that are coming through on our live feed. Okay, so we're going to keep the conversation going. I love it. What we do know, we're talking about healing. We're talking about coping skills. That's what you were talking about.
Yes,
Coping
yes,
skills, and for
yes.
individuals to make sure that they're doing it in a very healthy manner, and that we're not blaming others and we're taking accountability. Something I did want to talk about, Karen, really quick. And you're watching Let's Talk America with host Shana Thornton. Karen King is on with us. She's an acclaimed family therapist out of Atlanta Metro. When you said that, when we talk about individuals wanting to blame others and have this sort of meltdown mode with it, we also have to remember that we can also push away and sever relationships when we're being dysfunctional, when we're not being the healthiest, because, and let's go here, people do make mistakes, right? I'm not saying we don't, but when people are being vulnerable with you, and I'm talking about from your child to your significant other to a coworker, and they feel that's violated because you got mad, because you didn't get your way, that, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, obviously I'm an adult, been in relationships, that starts to compromise and break down the relationship that you likely thought was ideal, but bit by bit it chips away. Am I right or wrong?
You are right. And if you don't have a sense of self-awareness, then you're going to show up in a relationship to where everything is about you. And that's what the hurtful part is. So doing the discovery of self-awareness, finding out what your triggers are, what are the things that makes you emotional, what are the things that make you feel unloved, what are the things that make you feel unseen or unheard or not validated, right? Because if they're not healed, and I'll say this confidently, that whatever relationship you attach yourself to is only going to be as healthy and as strong as your deepest wound.
Ooh, wow.
So if you're not doing work to heal the wounds that are from your childhood, whatever relationship you attach yourself to, it doesn't matter whether it's personal, professional, romantic, it doesn't matter. The wound is going to dictate the relationship.
Powerful, powerful. And being aware of that wound, right? Because we're not to blame for the wounds that exist,
Correct.
what people did for us. We can love our mothers and fathers. And this is
Yes.
a very frank comment I want to make, because I have wonderful friends that seem to be at odds with this. We can love and adore and respect our mothers and fathers, but that does not mean when we get of age, when we get to a point where we're wise and we're logical and we're thinking for ourselves, right, that we cannot reflect, right? And I didn't say attack.
Right.
I want to be clear, because
Right.
there's a difference between attacking mom for her decisions, right?
Right.
Being unfair, not showing her grace, right? Because, and let's be real, people can only give you what they have. We talk
Yes.
about the trauma. Where do you think mom came from?
Yes.
Where do you think grandmother came from,
Yes.
right? We're talking about you going 2 generations back. You're talking about overwhelmingly majority of America and throughout this world not being educated. And
Right.
I don't say that to say because you're not educated, because you can't read and write properly, that there are things you're not going to be able to understand. But we know awareness is going to be limited, right? At the end of the day, the word major depression, postpartum depression are likely not going to resonate if you've not been educated in those environments. So we can reflect. And Karen, this is a question for you. As people do reflect on it and just giving grace, but people feel tug of war when they do address it, because I want to go here. This is real life and real talk for real people watching Let's Talk America Radio. What happens when you do address mom or dad and they are defensive about it when you're trying to cope, and say you even approach them in a respectful manner?
Yeah. So I'll say this, you're not responsible for someone else's reaction or response to you.
Okay.
You're only responsible for you. Healthy boundaries is a real thing, and it can be accomplished. So it will be uncomfortable initially because you are used to meeting the need of the other person.
Yes.
But when you turn the focus back to yourself to heal, you'll understand that sometimes people will get upset with you. Sometimes people will stop talking to you. And you have to ask yourself, is your peace worth bending and being flexible to other people's needs from you?
Okay.
At what point? Go ahead.
That's powerful.
Yeah. So at what point do you take care of you?
Yeah.
From a faith-based perspective, the order is God, self, and then others. You have no other God before me. Then you love yourself,
That's right.
and then you give that overflow of love to others. If you are consistently pouring out to others, an empty cup cannot fill other people up.
Powerful.
So you
Powerful.
have to find out what fills your cup. Yes, the word does say honor thy father and thy mother, right?
Yeah,
And honor doesn't mean that you lay down and be a doormat.
that's correct. That's
Nobody gets to wipe their feet on you.
that's correct.
And so I hate to say it, but it's like developing that tough skin because you can set healthy boundaries and have a healthy relationship that wasn't there before.
That's right.
There is an adjustment period. It's called transition.
Yes.
People may not like it at first. Change is a part of life.
Yes, it is.
Nobody stays the same. Like we are not still in diapers and
That's right.
nursing or drinking milk, right? We went from from baby food to table food to now we're out at fancy restaurants eating caviar, that kind of stuff. Same thing with your emotional wellness.
That's right.
You may not have gotten the tools that you needed from your home of origin, and you have the ability and the power right now, and also the awareness to make the changes that benefit you first, and then you can show up for other people.
I love that. And I do want to touch on something really quick because we've got some great comments and questions, and I'm getting to them really, really quick. But when you said you've got to love yourself first, right? You said your faith in God, right? Your motivation, your whole existence. And then you said to love you. And I think so many times, and I want to go here because you and I both are mothers,
Yeah.
right? And so many times there is an innate love in us to say, obviously, everybody else and my children have to come first. And obviously, our children, for you and I both, are our priorities. But I think there's a powerful point to be learned from what you said, because you can't pour from an empty bucket, right? And I've known women who were so well-meaning and so well-intentional, good women who I love and adore, who I wasn't quite sure they loved themselves, right?
Yeah.
But when they gave birth to this beautiful being, all their love and effort and dreams and expectations and vulnerabilities, all of it in their mind was going to be fixed from this child.
Right.
And I will say, and I want you to please cover that for the next few seconds,
Okay.
how unfair that is for that child. And don't get me wrong, we want our children to be the best they can be. But I think there are times where people live vicariously for the emptiness that exists in them. They want that daughter to go out and be everything she wasn't, and then to answer to her and do her beckoning call, or that son to always, mom has to be first and foremost. And some of this is cultural now, right? Where mom's got to come first. I got to pay mom's bills, and I'm not here to knock if that's what somebody's opting to do, right? That's their own decision. But let's talk for the next minute or so, Karen, about those expectations and all those dreams, putting that into a child, maybe not allowing them to be themselves, or trying to fix your own brokenness and your emptiness from this little boy, which is not fair.
Correct. And that's part of being able to see the individual. One thing that I talk a lot with my clients about is separating the role from the person. Right? So yes, I do have a daughter named Cassidy.
Yes.
Right? And she is a whole person.
Yes, she is.
So if I'm showing up in life with her with the expectation that she is going to be my daughter all of my life, then that doesn't give her the area to develop who she is individually. And that's those generational patterns of behavior that keep passing down.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so when you have these great expectations for your children, again, you are desiring to heal your childhood wounds in them. Correct. I hear parents all the time, well, I didn't have this growing up, so I wanted to make sure my child had it.
That's right.
Well, your child is half you and half your spouse or your significant other.
Yes.
Right? So you are trying to meet your whole need in somebody that's half of you. That means you're not seeing this person as an individual and actually seeing their need, because you're busy trying to fix you and them.
That's
And
right.
what is problematic for you may not even be an
That's
issue
right.
for them. Your child may not need Jordans, may not need to get their hair and nails done every
That's
2 weeks,
right.
but
That's
that is
right.
something that you're providing for them because it communicates healing for you because you didn't have it.
Correct. There you go. So,
So
so true.
this is where the coming back to the center, coming back to self, meeting that need for you so that you can actually see the other person that you're in relationship with. Because otherwise you're in there with blinders on. And it's
Correct.
like you have a shield up because in a way you're thinking you're protecting your child by giving them what you didn't have, but that shield has a sword on it that comes back and sticks you.
That's right. That's right. It truly does.
The order is to care for self first.
That's right.
And that's not selfish. Let me say that. To make sure that your needs are met is not selfish. Because if you are stressed out and God forbid you have a stroke, heart attack,
Mm,
anxiety attack, have a depressive episode that has you out of commission for 3 or 4 weeks, who is that benefiting?
that's correct. That's correct.
Nobody.
So true. And I also want to touch on the fact of when people, the child is vicariously them and vice versa. And you hear parents jokingly say this, but I think some of this is there for some family units. I brought them in this world, they're mine. It's almost like an ownership, which is unfair. And if it's a joke or not, that human being does not belong to you.
Correct.
Right. And
Correct.
please touch on that because I think there's some people that believe at any point that child owes them. At any point, that child belongs to them. And
Yeah.
the reality is, not only is that child 50% created by somebody else, but Karen, I want to go here. The child can have their own, where
Correct.
they're completely individual with their own, as they grow, their own likes and dislikes. And that may not always be choosing the woman or the man mama and daddy wants them to choose, right?
Correct. 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 And that goes back to those 7 generations of you don't know what's coming down through those generations. That's
Yeah.
like, you can have a family full of dark-haired children and this red-haired kid pops up. You know, it just acts, it happens that way sometimes.
Yeah.
But the thing is that a lot of parents feel like their children are an extension of them.
Yes.
So the kid loses their autonomy and their individuality. And
Correct.
so then we look at the trauma that comes up from that because what is going on that you don't know how to support or how to foster or put things in place for this person to develop in a capacity where they will be independent, that codependence is there as well. And
Yeah.
so if I feel like I own you, then those are deficits within me. I'm
That's
in
right.
with me.
That's right.
And
Power.
so, yes,
Yeah. I love it. I love it. It keeps going back to being healed within when
yes,
we deal with any family dynamic, be it our children, be it our parent, be it our significant other, be it our platonic best friend that we've been
correct.
best friends with for 10 years. I want to keep going down the questions because we have a very, very lively discussion. I want to do that before we get out of here. Cassandra said, wow, that is powerful. She said, learned behavior can mimic a family member's mental challenges. We spoke on a little bit ago and so key. Thank you, Cassandra, out of Atlanta for that. Also, Chrissy out of Atlanta Metro says, hi, ladies. What are your thoughts on attachment styles? Okay, that's a deep one. Let's talk. Chrissy, I don't know if you're talking about romantically or just in general, but I think they're all tied together from what I've observed and what I have interviewed over the years, Karen, that is it true? And Christy, hopefully we're going in the right direction for you, but is it true based off whatever attachment style perhaps was developed as a child, if my mother was dismissive and didn't care about my opinions? And by the way, for those that are listening, old school and hardcore, we're not saying you're asking the child, do you want to go to bed at 9:30 p.m.? That's not quite what we're saying, but we're saying in the terms of even having autonomy with what you choose to wear to school. Can I wear the blue shirt over the red shirt or the yellow shirt? No, you're going to wear this shirt because that's my favorite color. I love butterflies. You're going to wear butterflies. So if you had that type of parent that could perhaps lead to a certain attachment style, is it true or just urban myth, Karen, that perhaps when I grew up, I'm going to likely look for someone that either repels or sort of meshes, whatever way the dysfunction can go, with that sort of style that I'm used to. Because I've heard people say if you had a dismissive mother or father, you ironically sort of grow up and end up staying or seeing it normal to be with a man or woman that's dismissive.
Correct. That ties into what I was saying earlier about the level of the relationship you're in is based on the level, the deepest wound that you have. Because if the dysfunction is not there, then the relationship is not going to sustain because it's not familiar.
I see. Okay.
That makes
Good
sense.
point.
So if I had an overbearing parent, then my comfort zone is with that pressure being on me. So if I'm looking for a man who is not telling me what to do, how to do, when to do, I am not going to be interested in him at all. Even though that's the kind of man, I mean, if he does do that, then I'm going to be like chasing him down. That's where you see people like, I don't know why I can't leave him alone. And it's because he reminds you of what you had at home.
Right. That's right.
Right. And then if he shows up the opposite of that, then you're going to dismiss him immediately. And then you'll go back and say, well, I want a man who's attentive. I want a man who's this, that, and the other. But then it's like, but this guy was pursuing you. He was doing all the things and you rejected him because the work for the historical wound has not been done.
Beautiful. And I want to say this because I hear people sort of individuals that are not experts and not employed in the world of therapy like you. They get on social media and they say, oh, you are what you attract. I want to add a caveat to that in my personal opinion, right? Living on this earth over 40 years. I think good people, bad people, healed people, unhealed people are going to attract people. Right. Correct. Because the toxic guy wants the great girl too. Right. Let's be real. So this whole thing of you're only going to attract bad people isn't true. But it's something you just said that reaffirms my thinking on that of saying, but who you settle for, who you choose, who you keep running back to. Right. It's not that the other guys who showed you attention didn't pursue you, but maybe, and I'm being simplified here, but maybe you found him boring. Maybe he just wasn't the guy you're used to. Maybe you're using jargon as the heart wants what the heart wants. And at the end of the day, you're saying those are unhealed wounds that keep repeating the cycle for that man or woman.
Correct. Because it prevents you from attaching in a healthy capacity and being able to foster a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
So if the heart desires a healthy relationship, the heart has to heal from the wounds of the past relationships.
That's right. Powerful. We are talking some great life lessons here on Let's Talk America with host Shana Thornton. It's not coming from me. I've lived some and learned some, but I've always been able to surround myself with really smart people that are advocates, like the one and only family therapist out of Atlanta Metropolitan, Karen King. She's on with us, and we've got questions we've got to get to, Karen. And so let's not wait, my friend. Thank you, Christy, for that conversation or that question about attachment styles. Hopefully that helped you. Shauna out of Atlanta Metro said, she's speaking of African Americans. She says can be shameful of the smallest diagnosis and being able to seek help. Powerful statement. Thank you for sharing that question. Obviously, this show includes everyone, but she is talking about minorities, African Americans. I've heard, obviously, lots of experts like you, Karen, talk about the stigma to get help, as if perhaps other groups have been more open of saying, hey, I have this concern and I'm getting help and I'm going to be okay, where perhaps some minority groups have not been able to get past the stigma that something, as people quote unquote say, wrong. I don't like saying something is wrong, but there's an area of improvement. Help us out.
Well, I'll say this. A lot of the critique in the BIPOC community comes from historical standards, right? There's this thing that the person of color has to be 100 times better, 100 times faster, like all these different things. So to admit that you're struggling with something means that you're not that 100 times whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so that is the stigma that we have to desensitize in our community and build community to support one another, because who is perfect? Who does everything right? Who does not miss the mark? Not one.
No.
And so with that being said, being able to, like I said, it goes back to healing those wounds, y'all.
Beautiful.
Because those wounds are what is guiding every decision that we make. If we were born heading this way, then once you hit this realm, right, things are happening to you and you find yourself facing that way when you were born going this way.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out what in the world happened to
Mm.
me. And it's the life experiences that we didn't have skills for to teach us how to regulate, how to get back to a
Yeah.
baseline. And baseline is just like, how do you deal with life and cope with life in pro-social and positive ways to where it doesn't add more issues to what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because sometimes situations don't even deserve a response.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And-
when we're invested to that capacity, then it weighs in heavily on us. And then we're like, oh, well, every time I open my mouth, then I'm shut down. But then people are like, why don't you speak up? And then you speak up and then you're shut down again. So your value as a person has been demeaned.
yes, absolutely. I want to say this too, and she spoke about, African American group, but I also want to say, and as I said this, I want to bring up men of any race, and I want to bring up women too. And I say this, let me start off with women because I am she and she is I. That a lot of times when we're mothers, if you are divorced, if you're have someone you're in a partnership with, or you're married, women are, this, just globally expected to be tough. She's expected to be, oh, mom, and even on Mother's Day, right? My mom was this and she was that, and she did all these amazing things. So, as much as it's to celebrate mom, there's also in my mind a stigma that mom has to be all these things if dad is in the picture or not. Right, because there are a lot of wonderful fathers out there. I had an amazing father, right? There are a lot of great fathers out there, but there's a stigma in the world we live in. Always has been, if you ask me, but it still resonates today, where that woman is supposed to piece it together, right? She's tough. Let's go to men. He's a man. And what do women say? I want a manly man, and that means he doesn't cry. He's tough as nails. But tough as nails men get sad too. And what happens when they get angry, sad, when they feel they've been done unfairly? What do they do with that? Help us out though when people feel they've got to be tough for the family, or you've always taken care of mom who has dementia, so you got to be tough. And if you admit that she needs to go in a home, somehow you're seen as the betrayal Judas of all of them.
Yeah. I'll say this, people on the outside always have something to say because they're not the ones walking in your shoes, right? People have empathy and compassion for things once they have gone through it, but they're very opinionated when they see you walking through it.
That's a good point.
And so to speak to, again, like caring for self, I know I keep going back to that, but that is like the foundational step for everything. If you don't do what takes care of you, then you're going to be at the mercy of who has your ear, of who's speaking to you.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true, because that becomes almost your norm.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And that's why awareness and education is key. And that's what Let's Talk America with Hoshana Thorne, with Karen King on tonight, is trying to do. I want to get to these comments because they are powerful.
Okay.
Sadiqa out of Atlanta says, in the African American community, I wonder sometimes if, due to the pain that our grandparents may have endured, caused them not to share. Some of the memories were not pleasant. I think that is a powerful statement. Certainly in African American community, and I want to say other communities too, because when we talk about, and I'm not just talking about the racism or sexism that women may have gone through, but I'm also talking about family trauma. Because family trauma, whatever it is, if it was molestation,
Right.
if it was abuse, that's universal,
Right.
And I want to be clear so everybody understands that that's universal. But to Sadiqa's point and the comment follow-up that I made, what are those reasons why some people, older African Americans or older individuals of any racial group, Karen, may hold back on not sharing?
Well, if you don't have the tools or the skills to process it, to desensitize it within your system, right? So you have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. That's what runs through your body. That's what lets you know when something is hot. You know, it lets you know when to be excited or afraid. When that system has been overpowered for so long, then your ability to gauge different things as safe or not goes away. And if you know that you have something that you don't really have the control over that you desire, nobody wants to talk about their vulnerable moments in a public setting or
Okay.
even in a I hate to say an unsafe setting, but it's not conducive to the amount of hurt that's within their body
Mm,
because they haven't effectively or efficiently processed it. So how can I share with you what's still troubling me?
yeah. Yeah. Powerful. That's true. That's a very good point. And also I will add this, perhaps too, it's the idea, right? And I think this is universal from my opinion. Maybe the idea that you want to be considered as well put together.
Yes.
Right. No
Yes.
matter what trauma you came from, no matter what poverty you came from, no matter what brokenness of watching perhaps a mother complain about her weight so much so that has you obsessing over weight unfairly at 15 years old,
Yeah.
that you on the outside, and this is people, hashtag people around the world, you're to look like you're put together
Yeah.
because the family looks strong when they do, right?
Right.
And often when we read of dynasties, if you will, in the past, from Rome to Africa to Europe or to the United States, some of the most well-known families, even today, if we mention their name, they were
Mhm.
strong and unified, and everybody was put well together. When in reality, every house has weak spots.
Correct. And
If
that's
we-
why there's no term as normal,
Yeah.
right? The
Mhm. Yeah.
normal is abnormal. Like that's what the normal is. The normal is dysfunction. Everybody has some dysfunction in their family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you want to admit it or not. Right.
Right.
I once
Right.
saw a quote that was funny. It said, if you don't think there's a problem in your family, maybe you're the problem. Just some light humor there. Thank you, Sadiqa. What a great question about the memories. And she said it best. Karen said, if the resources and tools aren't there, you're not going to be able to address that publicly or privately to your
Right.
daughter or grandson. Martina says, hey, everyone. Hey, y'all. She says that she has a therapist. Thank you for so much
Mm,
for your transparency, a life coach and a marriage counselor and a business coach. She
yeah.
says, I don't play about my mental health. I love it.
Yeah.
Uh, she said, Al Anon is good for people that have dealt with family members who were alcoholics. Oh, Alcoholic Anonymous. Sorry, got it.
Mhm.
The abbreviation. It's good for people that have dealt with family members who were alcoholics. That's a great point. You're a therapist. Karen, I never thought about that. I think when we think Alcoholic Anonymous, we think of those individuals who are suffering from the disease of alcoholism. But Martinez bringing up a good point. Is it fair and logical to also address whatever issues you have in groups like AA or other supportive groups if you happen to could relate to someone who too had a mother that was a closet alcoholic?
Absolutely. There are so many support groups out there for you to be involved in. NAMI, NAMI, it's the National Alliance of Mental Illness.
Okay.
And what they do is they have groups, they have all kinds of programs set up for you to be able to go in and just be amongst people who have had something similar going on to what you have in your life.
Yeah.
So whether you do individual therapy, whether you do a group program somewhere, whether you do a 12-step program, they're all helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever it takes.
Yes.
What
And I
and
want to say this too, Shanna, when you were talking about like how do people cope and manage when like the judgment is on them where maybe mom or dad has to go into the care facility or
Mhm,
something. A
mhm,
lot of
mhm,
times people do turn to substance. They create a vice that gives them an outlet. So
mhm,
it can be alcohol, it can be drugs, it
mhm,
can be working out at the gym, it can be eating.
mhm.
There are so many
Overeating.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So there are so many things that people can get involved in that are maladaptive that is giving them this temporary relief or release.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to bring attention to that when the AA came
Thank
up.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you. And I think that's a great point because I think it's hidden. We don't quite see it. It's not as overt if all of a sudden he's going to the gym twice a day, right?
right,
Because we're like, oh, he's focused on his health, which
right,
we want people to be, right? But it becomes obsessive. Is it healthiness or are you using that as a distraction,
right,
right, to not face the reality? And
right,
that's a very good point because the drinking, the alcohol, the overeating, we'll see that as concerning,
right,
right? But it's the other things that you can not be aware of, all of a sudden they become obsessed with something
Correct.
that seems out of the norm. Thank you for sharing that. Sadiqa says, she follows up saying, faith and therapy does work. Thank you,
Yes.
Sadiqa, for that affirmation that Karen pointed out. When Chrissy asked about earlier in our live chat about attachment styles, Montina says, Chrissy, I read a book about them, and thank God my husband and I both are secure. I don't think I could deal with an anxious attachment style. What do you think about them? I think that, and we're just going to have you address that, Karen. Different attachment styles certainly come up. I guess I'm going to do real talk for real people. And this is just real. I think you and I both can identify this, and anybody out there that's ever dated more than one person, right? But there are people that can be very clever, and not that a lot of times it's intentional to cover up, but you may not see some of the fallacies in that attachment style until you've fallen for them, or until you've moved in, until you've said I do, until then. And then you start to see, wait a minute, he needs reassurance every 5 minutes. Wait a minute, she constantly needs me to buy something to make her feel of worth, right? I mean, and I think often when you're in that in love stage, and you tell me, therapist, but we can have our blinders on, right? When he called every 10 minutes the first 3 months, it was cute. He thinks about me all the time. I wanted an attentive guy. And then you realize a year later, no, this isn't normal. There's something else going on here.
Right. What comes up for me is that we got to get into those historical wounds.
Yeah.
Because what is going on for you that you don't see the red flag that 10, 12 calls a day is not like conducive to a healthy relationship. That's a lot of communication, unless you are planning an event or something like that.
Are you planning the wedding? If not, we've got to move on.
Right. So there is a cycle with it as well. So it's like, it's cute at first, right? He's calling, he's checking in. You feel connected, protected, all the things. And then it's like, oh, he's annoying, right? Because that threshold that you had for that consistent contact has been met. And now the similarities or the familiarity from whatever historical thing from your family of origin shows up, and now you're avoidant, right? Now you want to push away, like, I had enough of that. And then when you look at the anxious attachment style, that is you trying to control the environment. Like, you are the controller. Because you don't have that peace within yourself, because you don't have that security, you are regulating everything around you.
Yeah. And I want to say this, that it's just fair. And I saw a reel that addressed it a few months ago. Calling 12 times or calling 50 times or one time, whatever insecurity is there is not going to make them faithful or unfaithful. I mean, is that not? I mean, let's be real, right, Karen? I don't think that calls are going to convince them that they're not going to do it. Just kind of common sense from my take.
But that's something that they can control. They cannot control the other person, but they can control how many times they pick up the phone and call.
Beautiful. We are talking real talk for real people, and we're going to be heading out in a few minutes. So get your last comments and questions in as I go through. Martina of Atlanta Metro McDonough says again, I think we rely too much on faith. Go talk to someone who can help you heal what works. Okay, that's a very poignant statement. Karen, your take?
Absolutely, because like I said, those behavioral patterns that are passed down, that may not have anything to do with faith or spirituality. That comes from what you are seeing. So absolutely, behavior modification is a part. You know, every issue that shows up is not spiritual. I agree 100%. Right. So I'm a faith-based therapist, and there are some sessions I have where we don't talk anything about anything faithful. We're talking about the person showing up and what works for them, what doesn't work for them, their family of origin. I don't know if you guys know about this, but this is a really good way for you to get some history on your, just based off of what you know in your family. It's called a genogram, Genogram. And it allows you to basically lay out your family tree. It starts with you, like your siblings, and then it goes up to your parents and their siblings, and then your grandparents. And so it has to where you can put down whatever it is that you see. And if you see like divorce is in this, what patterns are showing up for divorce to
Okay.
be so heavy in this family? If you see substance use over here, what is happening in this family? What's not being talked about? What is being done or
Beautiful.
not being done? And then you can see how you're showing up in life. And then those are the things that you can talk about in therapy with your therapist.
Yeah. I love that. I love that because you're looking at patterns again. And I know you're not saying this. It doesn't mean that if all the women and all the men in your family went through this, you will. But I
Correct.
think it's awfully naive not to see. Let me just be aware of it. Right. So I'm aware, just like we say, many people will be like, if they have a family, a friend that had something, if it was fibroids or it was type 2 diabetes or something, there was a condition with the liver. And a lot of inquisitive, intelligent people
Yeah.
will say, Karen, what were your symptoms?
Yeah.
I think that's how we should be about our mental and emotional health. What
Absolutely.
were the symptoms? And the
Yeah.
symptoms are not always obvious, but maybe it's calling the guy or the girl 200 times in 2 days and not recognize, well, there's nothing wrong with that. I like to talk to my person. No, there's something bigger there. There's a symptom that
Right.
may be leading to anxiousness or severe anxiety that can be addressed,
Right.
right? And it
Right.
doesn't mean you're going to snap your fingers and you're going to be healed like that, or you may always deal with it. I'm saying this, you help me out to
Yeah.
some degree, but you can certainly improve once you make sure you're claiming it, not in a way that it's going to be with you forever, but
Right.
if you're telling yourself, I've got this, and this is not going to get the best of me. Is
Right.
that fair?
It is. And self-awareness is the key, because if you don't know where you're coming from, how do you possibly have direction to know where you're going?
Absolutely. Beautiful.
Because history repeats itself. Whether you know the history or not, it is going to
Beautiful.
repeat.
Beautiful. Either way. A
Mhm.
great question for Cassandra out of Atlanta Metro. She says, Karen, how do you encourage a family member to seek therapy?
Oh, that's a heavy one, right? Because a lot of people don't want the truth. They don't want to be, we talked about this. They don't want to be told they're doing something wrong. They don't want to be seen as less than. Um, One thing that I would say is I've learned to preface things in the fashion of care and concern. I see, you're not showing up how you normally show up. Like, this situation is weighing heavily on you. Have you thought about talking to someone? And sometimes they may not be responsive or receptive to your first inquiry of it. You may be the one who plants the seed, and then maybe somewhere else they will hear, somebody else, or maybe they'll see a reel on Facebook or TikTok or something, and it will kind of water that seed for them to be inquisitive about it. But I would say always approach with kindness,
Yes.
with empathy, and always asking questions and not telling.
Mm,
Because to ask questions means that you're invested and you care. And not
yeah.
accusatory questions like, man, why you ain't going to therapy?
Yeah.
Not that. Say something like, hey, I realize you've been struggling with this. Um, have you thought about talking to a therapist? Do you have somebody to talk to? Like, that's a question, right? Do you have a close friend or somebody to talk to? And if not, have you thought about going to therapy?
Mhm. Beautiful, beautiful. What a great way. And like you're saying, do you have someone to talk to? If it's a therapist, or are you being able to release and vent? But I do want to point out something we said earlier: venting for some serious health or mental concerns. I'm not talking about telling your best friend or telling your girlfriend what your guy did that ticked you off, right? And I'm saying this as a layman, not a professional like you. I'm not convinced you need to book an appointment with Karen to tell her, and he keeps buying me the wrong gift. He's
Right. Right.
he said he was going to call and he didn't call. But we're talking about things that are serious in nature. Not that anything's wrong, but to be able to make sure that we're giving it to someone that can process it.
Right.
Because I can love my best friend at work. I can love my best friend that lives 5 houses down from me, or that I've known for nearly 20 years. And as much as she's funny and we're comical, she's not caring where she's had professional training to identify and perhaps get us through. Doesn't mean friendship's not curing, because I think
Right.
there's power in
You've got to
friendship,
have them
but know
tried.
the difference. Yeah, know the difference of us laughing about guy stuff and saying it's time to address what's going on.
And see, if something is impacting your daily functioning, I will tell you that is a key to look
Beautiful.
into getting some professional help. If
Yeah.
you find that you are being sluggish getting out of the bed, like you really don't want to go to work, you have anxiety
Yes.
about these different things, you're avoiding going around certain people. There are some skills that can be built, some
Yeah.
supports that can be put around you to help you manage and deal and cope with these situations in your life.
Yeah. And you're going to be just fine. You're going
Yes,
to be just fine. Wherever you are in your journey, you're going to be just fine. Just get the help you deserve. You're
yes.
watching Let's Talk America with host Shana Thornton with the one and only. We have acclaimed family therapist out of Atlanta Metropolitan. Karen King is on with us. Got to get to these questions because these are good. Michelle out of Columbia, South Carolina, my home state, said, awesome topic, Karen. Cassandra said, 100 on the information you're giving. Shauna said, I love it. Jada out of Columbia, South Carolina said, just went through something similar with the prom decisions that she's talking about with our children and living vicariously through them. She said, I had to let her do it her way and let her make her own decisions. I
Correct.
know that may seem simple to some people that have adult children, Karen, but how powerful is that for a mother of a great teenager?
I would tell you it is the most powerful thing because not only does it um, validate for the mom or the parent, that they have given the child all the tools that they possess to be successful and they're actually trusting them to walk it out. It
Beautiful.
also builds the confidence in the child that they are able to make decisions, and the parent can step in and be the support for when, not if, because they will fall. They will have
They
times in their
will.
life to where things are not going to work out right, even when they use all the tools you've given them. And that gives them the ability to build their own autonomy and identity. So
Yeah.
kudos, mom. Hands off, hands up to you. Great job.
Yeah, so powerful. And I think you have to use those teaching moments like making the decision for prom, making the decision what to get papa or auntie for a holiday Christmas gift.
Mhm.
Because I think sometimes, and I heard someone say this, a retired principal years ago, and it was true, it's quicker for parents to do it themselves. And
Yes,
so they would just do it because it's quicker. I'm not going to show them how to clean out the tub. It's
right,
quicker if I'm not going to show them how to make avocado toast, right?
right.
Because I can just get it done. But we have to realize the cycle of life keeps rolling,
Yeah,
and it is what it is. We're not going to be here forever,
right.
and the goal, obviously, they're going to outlive us. And if
Yeah,
we don't give them those tools, those resources, that knowledge, Karen, where are they going to be? Because you and I both know this: you cannot plan death. We all
right.
want to live to be 80 plus, but the overwhelming majority of us likely will not live to be 80 plus. And so, what does that mean? You have to be able to have the children be able to survive on their own. And I want to point out something that's true as we deal with aging parents. Because they lived to 80 doesn't always mean they're in the mind capacity to
Yeah,
continue making decisions
correct.
properly. That child may have to turn around and start making decisions for their mother and father, right?
Right. Absolutely right. When you're looking at adult children who have children and aging parents, that's a lot of pressure because it's almost like you just want to hold the reins on both of them, right?
Yeah.
Because you're used to mom and dad being independent and making decisions and the child being dependent on you. And now the
Absolutely.
roles have changed. So
Yes.
now we have to allow the child to go and be independent and then put the supports around the parents
Yeah.
because we want to believe that our parents are going to stay mentally and cognitively intact, physically healthy, but the reality is that the body declines, the mind declines. And so how were we preparing to care for aging parents? Because a lot of clients, they have what we call caregiver burnout.
Mm. Powerful.
Okay. And that is where they are doing all the things for all the people all the time
Yes.
and not caring for themselves, not setting those boundaries. So, one thing that my family is doing right now is we are speaking with an attorney to kind of get some paperwork in place to get the living wills to figure out what the end of life stages are going to look like, planning for that. That takes a lot of the pressure off of the adult child that's caring for the aging parent.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
when you can sit down with them, and I would tell y'all, the sooner the better. Like, don't wait until you see the decline. I'm not saying don't do it then, but if you can be proactive with it, go
Beautiful.
ahead and start having these conversations now
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
it's not so tense. So that if
Yeah.
mom or dad or somebody pass away, the family is not arguing and fussing and fighting over
Beautiful.
things.
And,
And
and take
order
full
and harmony.
advantage of, and this is just my take on it, full advantage of the mental capacity where it is now, right?
Correct.
So if there are signs of dementia now, and obviously you're going to say, well, they're not enough, but it's much better ideally to do it now than to wait 3 years from now, because you're
Correct.
at least perhaps getting capturing somewhat of their personality preferences. I
Yes.
would certainly hope. Let's keep going down with the comments. Deed Michelle said, so true. She's agreeing with some comments you made earlier. Kenneth Oliver said, I love to hear Karen speak. We do too. Chrissy gave all hands up, 10 out of 10. Representative Mary Ann Santos says, yes, please take care of yourself. Thank you so much, Mary Ann Santos, for that information, affirming what you said about you've got to take care of yourself first.
Mhm.
Shauna Moore says, amen. Say it loud when it said taking care of yourself. Deborah Abernathy said, you're giving some golden nuggets, Karen.
Mhm.
Thank you. Deborah also said, faith with the work. So true. Like you said, it's two together.
Yes.
Lee Smith says, so true. We have to prepare our children. That's right, Lee. And she said, just set up her mom's trust. It is so important. That's right. Cassandra said, yes, ma'am. Now you all are speaking my language. She's prepared and not scared. I
Yes.
love that. I
That's
love that. I'm going
good.
to keep going down as well. We had some other comments from those individuals, and we thank you for commenting and asking those questions as we prepare to wrap up. So certainly get it going, get those last questions in. So we also have Janine. Oh, well, okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to miss anybody. I do not, because it was a very, very active chat. Rochelle Rodriguez says, out of Atlanta Metro, said that it is all right. Is that it right there? Faith and therapy. That's what she's saying. Faith and therapy. I believe denial is also a big part as well. There's no admitting that I may actually need to talk and vent to someone who can help me figure out and give me guidance through my anxiety, depression, or other concerns.
Yeah.
Great point, Karen.
Yeah. I want to say this. We are the highest lived experience that we know. And what I mean by that is that I if I'm in a wounded state, that's what I'm going to call it, where I have the
Okay.
historical stuff, the unhealed wounds, right? Then because the only life that I know is what I've lived,
Yeah.
like when I say we expect other people expect us from other people, we're expecting that their lives have mirrored ours in some way and they have nothing of value to give to us.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
a reality.
Yeah, that's a valid point. You're right. We're all products of that experience that we have.
Yes,
That's real. And I go back to, I made the comment, people can only give you what they have. Right.
correct.
And I know we may be angry because he may not be what we want him to be or responding the way he is, but you getting upset, you having a meltdown, you're going back and forth, it's not going to change who someone is. And I think it's something powerful, Karen. I want to speak on really, really quick. We're getting to those final comments. But there are a lot, everyone's a dating expert now on social media. And you're a therapist. I'm sure it's cracking you up, right? Everyone has these ideas of things.
Mm.
And many people would say, if he wanted to, he would. If
Yeah.
she wanted to, he would. And I recently saw a psychologist on Instagram, and she addressed that, and she said it's not simply true.
Right.
If he wanted to, and if he's capable of it,
Correct.
because she's saying there's so many people that have emotional concerns that go undiagnosed, that are walking around every day. You're dating them, you're married to them, they go to
Right.
work with you, they're the cashier in the store. She was like, it's not just that they want to. She goes, there are people who really want to, but it's not in them because they've not taken care of those wounds that you talk about. So
Correct.
let's also just give grace. And I think it oversimplifies it. We say he just didn't want to. A lot of times too, Karen, you're as a therapist, but there's work that needs to be done. And mentally and emotionally, some people have not done that.
Correct. And I
If
just
it's
want
possible to, if it's because
I'm
some people
gonna
have chemical imbalances.
right.
Yeah,
I'm gonna hold up these two items that are on my desk and I'm gonna explain. You can want them to, but this is the capacity that they have to give it to you.
that's right.
So when you're desiring something from somebody that is beyond their capacity to provide for you, that is where that self-work comes in again.
That's it.
Instead of villainizing that person, they're not necessarily a bad person. They just do not have the capacity to give you what you're desiring. And then so we have to have empathy and compassion and grace for that as well.
Yeah, we do. And we have to Okay, there you are. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Little technical glitch, but we are working through it. Thanks for being on Let's Talk America with host Shana Thornton Podcast Radio. So thank you for that information. Did want to bring out that we have Dr. Rashana Radian on, and she says 7 generations. You're talking about what you said earlier. Post-traumatic slave syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. Hope I pronounced that right, Doc.
Yep.
Are you familiar with this concept?
I am, and she is phenomenal. I have seen several of her lectures, and I'll tell you the example that she gave that really opened my mind to some of the isms in the Black culture or community. She was talking about how the put down of your children back in the slavery days was actually protection for them. That was the mother's way to keep the plantation owner from sending their minor children off to other places. So she would say stuff like, no, he's stupid, he dumb, he ain't got
That's
it yet.
correct.
And so it has gone from a protective capacity to just a part of the culture, not realizing that it's time for a change.
Yeah. And that goes that learned behavior.
Yes.
Right. That's passed down. And I want to say this, and I've known wonderful people who have said, well, my mom did it to me.
Yeah.
And I've had these conversations with people, educated, aware people, but they say my mom did it to me and it worked on me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hear that, your mother or your father were not as educated and aware, likely, right? I'm saying likely. I'm not saying there are exceptions to the rule, right? There are people that do come from educated parents, but it's not on a massive level, right? If your parents are over at 70 years old, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that they're likely as educated as a highly educated therapist of today, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, your mom likely came from the 1940s.
Yeah.
Who was likely raised by a woman born at the turn of the century. Right. And to your point, that's survival mode.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that grandmother wasn't a wonderful, loving, nurturing woman, but she was a loving, nurturing woman who lived in a country at that time, and it's being real, that didn't allow women to vote.
Correct.
Right. Where often if a man beat up his wife or girlfriend, there was no one coming to do an investigation.
Correct.
Right. And we're just talking real. Right. There was not necessarily the massive integration of social services where there's a social worker coming to investigate a child who could have likely been molested. Right. There were no enforcers that all children go to school. And if they don't go to school, there's a school social worker and a sheriff's deputy coming to find out. So these are facts. Right. You can't debate facts. And if you don't have those measures in place, there are likely an odd that grandmother dealt with some stuff. And I'll say this, even I love unions. I love long time unions. But Karen, I don't need to tell a therapist that what grandmother dealt with, she was married 65 years to granddaddy. And there's likely a lot of stuff she put up with that you and I likely would not have. And I'm just going to be honest, it doesn't mean every woman and every man is the same, but there were a lot of outside children. There were a lot of outside STDs and STIs. There was and I'm just being real. I'm talking about knowing family histories and communities. There was a granddaddy that went off for 3 months and came back around. And at the end of the day, you can tell me grandma was tough. And I'm not saying she wasn't, but grandma also likely went through a lot of depression, a lot of tears, a lot of heartache, and had to repeat it because that was accepted in society. Am I right or wrong?
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely right. And their ability to sustain and pull away and live this established life just was not there. So it truly was sacrificing the self for the greater good of the family.
That's right.
Right. And then when I have clients that come in and they struggle with having the dichotomy of both and, right? Like my mom was mean to me and she did the best that she could to take care of me. Like that's a real place to be.
That's right.
And being able to integrate that to where you can see both and not feel guilty and not feel like you're villainizing your mom or dad or whoever it is, knowing that they did the best they could and your emotional needs were not met. Like that's a real place to be.
That's real. And I think more people probably realistically have to deal with that, but they put on a smile for Christmas dinner,
Yeah.
right? They put on a smile for Thanksgiving dinner. And again, and you said it at the beginning of the show, it doesn't mean you cannot love and respect mom and dad, but
Correct.
mom and dad were human, and
Yeah.
you're not going to convince us otherwise, right? We
Right.
know that. We know that. I mean, if you speak of, oh, things were so great in my home, well, did you have AI parents, right? Because yeah, I mean, and real talk, everybody goes through stuff. That doesn't mean everybody had a dysfunctional household. No, not
Right.
at all. But at the end of the day, you likely saw things that may not have been the healthiest at it. Because again, 80 years ago, where
Mhm.
was the awareness of this is how we disagree?
Right.
Or like you said, when they got mad with each other, they stopped talking for 2 or 3 weeks, and
Right.
maybe granddaddy disappeared on the weekends and
Mhm.
popped back up with no money on Monday morning,
Right.
and likely common in some communities. So we have to make sure that we're really evaluating what happened and how that impacts the
Mhm.
previous generations. I'm not giving people excuses to be dysfunctional. Lord knows I'm not making up excuses for anybody being abusive.
Right.
But at the end of the day, people can give you what they have. And
Right.
like you said, if there's a mental and emotional prison, there really it's really obviously something that has to stop in
Yeah.
its tracks. Janine Holt Harris says, how do you go about finding a good therapist? That's a good question,
It
because
is
we've
good.
had cardiologists on this show, we've had endocrinologists, we've had surgeons who have said every doctor is different, right? I mean, we all know they're board certified. We know Karen's been trained. But Karen, how true is it? And I've had psychologists come on before saying it does need to be a fit, because not every therapist is good at trauma. They've not had training
Absolutely.
on that. And I know you mentioned you have. So each therapist has a subset of what they specialize in.
Absolutely. Everybody, a lot of people, they have their niche, what they call it, that they work in. Some is trauma, some is women's issues, some is
Okay.
depression, some is anxiety. You have some who kind of have a catch all, what they can do. But what I will tell you is that a good therapist is like your most comfortable pair of shoes.
Okay.
And I will tell you this, I always encourage people to meet with someone a minimum of 3 times before making a decision.
Okay.
Because the first encounter could be spot on, the second encounter could be like going to hell and back, and then the third encounter could balance it out for you. So whatever it is, like give it 3 tries and see if it works for you. Um,
Got it.
because a lot of times people feel like because you have the credentials that you have the ability to connect with them. And what I have learned is that probably 75 to 80% of the therapy is the connection, that the therapeutic bond that you create with your
Beautiful.
professional.
Beautiful.
So
That's
ask the questions. And I want to say this thing right here too. If you ever go to a therapist that does not have a therapist, I would have questions, because I'm a therapist who has a
yeah.
therapist, because I live in this world that is imperfect
Correct.
and I don't have all the answers.
Correct.
Right. And
Power.
I'm not saying like weekly therapy, but they should have someone that they check in with that gives them the balance when they have rough issues going on.
Yeah.
You want to know that, because how do I not patronize and participate in my own profession?
Yeah. Now, and I also will say this as someone who is spoken with a lot of individuals in mental and emotional health, with a previous career and also in a world of journalism and podcasting. There's a lot thrown on you, and how does the mind process that?
Correct.
Almost like a physician is treating oncology. There's a lot there,
Yeah.
and you can be tough, you can be experienced, you can be a veteran, but you're still human,
Yes.
right? And the
Yes.
human experience, and you're human, Karen, and you and your colleagues with a past of your own,
Yes.
right? Because I
Yes.
mean, you also have the same things that everybody else has,
Absolutely.
and you're expected to be there and be an advocate and an expert to help them out.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I
that's
tell my
real.
clients all the time, I don't go to therapy for y'all. I go to therapy for me.
I love it. I love it. Miss Harris, thank you for that question about how to find a good therapist. Shauna said, powerful conversation. Thank you so much. Cassandra mentioned the macho type. When we were talking about men and also women taking on the superwoman syndrome,
Yeah.
that's very real. Denisha, thank you, out of Atlanta, saying so true, agreeing with some of your comments. Lawanda out of Atlanta Metro has a question for you, Karen. She said, what are the resources available for people that cannot afford weekly, monthly therapy? That's real. That's
Yeah,
real.
yeah, it is. I For my practice, I actually offer an affordable therapy program. We have a sliding scale where, depending on what your finances are, you fill out an application, submit different documents, and then we'll let you know what your fees are. I would say, for me personally, I feel it is my duty to do a certain number of pro bono clients a year. I feel like that's one way that I give back.
Okay.
Also, there are nonprofits that actually have funding sources for people who need therapy. One that I can, two actually that I can think of right now. One is called Open Path, and then the other one is called the Loveland Foundation. And they both, one of them provides a discounted fee for the person going to therapy, and the other one actually provides resources for them to go.
Nice. So there you go. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Karen, once this is over, if you'll provide that in the live chat, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, along with your information as we begin to close up.
Yeah.
Denisha says healing begins with yourself.
Yeah.
Martina brings up that different insurance plans not only allow therapy, but also a life coach. Deborah Abernathy says, good stuff, ladies. Thank you. Chrissy says, I'm just starting to learn about attachment styles. Everything I've seen sounds pretty good so far. It's fascinating how our bodies and minds process trauma. And I'll say this, Chrissy and Karen, you help us out. Not only how it processes it, but how it goes back to what's familiar. How it will almost force that because the brain wants to go with what's familiar.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. 100%. I have nothing to add to that.
Martina says, nope, I will not trauma bond with people. Okay, great. Look, it'd be great if all of us could do that, but people often will let their guard down, especially if love or romance is involved or other things. Karen, real talk for real people.
Yes.
And people get more physical and with intimacy and allow that to blind their judgment, right? Is that real for a lot of men and women?
It is. It is. Passions drive a lot of outcomes that are not necessarily in your favor.
Yeah.
I can say that.
So yeah, let's certainly be careful and safe in all that people are doing out there.
Yes.
And it's a great book. She's talking about the Attached book. Deborah said, wow. Shauna said, self-reflection and to listen is the best response. I think that's a reference to people when they get into it with individuals and there's some meltdowns. Kimberly, a close relative of yours, she mentioned you weren't frozen. So I think that's when we had some technical issues earlier. Shauna said, great job, Karen King. And Miss Harris says, keep talking. And we love to hear you talk. I love it. And thank you. We got some great comments as well here. And Lee said, woo, I think, and Deborah said, wow, when we were talking about some of the things of the past. Karen, this has been a complete, full conversation. It went longer than we expected, but I think it was needed. There was a lively live chat, and we never want to stop any of our listeners and viewers from perhaps getting the information and awareness they need. Again, a quick housekeeping note, this was for educational and awareness purposes. For more specific information about your own mental and emotional health, please seek your own provider, be it a therapist or be it your medical physician, to get help and follow up specifically about you. But speaking of that, about you, Karen King, what a pleasure to have you on the show. An exclusive all-time VIP guest. We're going to have you back on to talk more about mental and emotional health because it was a hit. But where can our national and international listeners find out more about you and your practice and your platform?
So I am right here in Stockbridge, Georgia. Right off Eagles Landing Parkway. My website, and I can also put that in, is tlctraumawork.com. I'll give my phone number is 404-446-0300. And I do virtual and in person.
Yeah, nice. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I've heard from a little birdie, you have a huge event coming up this Saturday.
Yes,
take it away.
Yes. Let me show you. So I'm a part of a nonprofit called THG Community Services, and we are doing our first annual Be Stroke Aware Health Fair. What we found out is that 80% of strokes are preventable. And people don't know it. So we're doing this health fair to educate our community and to bring healing from all directions and all levels. So it is this Saturday from 10 to 2 at Stockbridge Middle School.
I love it. And I have seen a lot of information about individuals who you would usually not expect, younger Americans actually having some strokes.
Yes. My
Yeah.
sister actually works at Piedmont Henry, and she was sharing that she's had some really young people to come in there, like in their 20s.
Ah,
So it's really impacting our community. And we perish for a lack of knowledge.
yes,
So
absolutely.
we are the hands and the eyes and the heart, the feet. Like, we're doing the groundwork to get the information out there so we can heal our community.
I love it. I love it. I plan to attend, so I'm looking forward to that. Karen, before you get off this important conversation, which was eye-opening, and I love it, and I feel so inspired and motivated about it. You just talked about strokes, right?
Mhm.
And when I think of stroke as someone who worked on one particular side of the healthcare industry many years ago, I think of hypertension. I think
Yeah.
of dyslipidemia. I think of obesity. Obviously, things that can put you at risk. But it's something, there's another pillar that we don't talk about as much. And I want you to briefly close us out. And that's about the mental and emotional state of your mind, right? So
Absolutely.
we can go to the gym and work out, and I can live and do my strength training all day long,
Right.
right? And I
Right.
can get on the antihypertensive medication, and I can make sure I'm taking whatever statin it is out there to lower that risk of
Right.
stroke with the plaque in the arteries, and lower that bad LDL. But
Yeah.
Karen, if this,
Yeah.
and I want you to close out on this, if this is not at peace, if this is a constant struggle, if this is not quite learned how to deal with conflict, because I can't control if my significant other does right.
Right.
I can't control if my manager's going to do right by me at the job. I can't control if my neighbor's not going to speed on the street and I've got a toddler walking along. But I can control what happens with me.
Correct.
Help us out.
Correct. What I will say is that your brain is the motherboard to your body and its functions.
Mm,
Okay. So one thing is that when anxiety sets in, when depression sets in, these things are taking over involuntary functions in your body.
yeah.
They are causing you to have panic attacks. Like, these things are causing you to not want to get out of bed. So, and I'll say this, like I said earlier, it's like putting your foot on that gas pedal and depleting all the stores and still wanting to demand that it still performs. So when you get to that place to where you're having the racing thoughts, right? You're feeling the palpitations in your heart. You may feel tension in your shoulders or in your jaw. You may have to sleep with a night guard, like that is cinching your teeth in your sleep. There are
Mhm.
so many indicators and signs and symptoms that let you know that something is going on
Good
with
Lord.
your emotions or mentally, just by the way that your body is
Yeah.
reacting or responding. And so, if the mind is not calm, if it's not balanced, if you don't have tools and skills to help yourself ground and center, then think about what I said earlier. Whatever level of pain or wound you have in
Mm,
your life, that's where your choices come from. So sometimes we hear ourselves say this: I found myself doing blah, 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 blah. Well, if you're finding yourself in your actions, where were you before you found yourself?
wow.
So doing that connection, doing those grounding, seeking your therapist, making sure that you know how to meet your own emotional need
Yes.
is dire. Like, it's a non-negotiable, because your best thinking makes the choices for you. And if your best thinking is wounded, or if your best wounded, I mean, if your best thinking is betrayed, or whatever the thing is, then that's where your decisions are lining up. And
Yeah.
then your bodies are taking the weight on that. Now you have insomnia. You may not be eating well, or you may be eating too
Mm,
much, or you may turn to a vice. All of those things are negatively impacting your physical body. And
yeah.
that's what can set up the dis-ease in your body. So
Beautiful.
I'll tell you this, being able to manage stress is
Mm.
imperative. So that means self-care. And self-care is not just about getting your hair and your nails and your facials. I
And the
call it
massage at the spa.
correct. You can get that massage. But are you meal prepping? I'm stepping on my own toes right now. I'll be honest. If you know that preparing those meals ahead of time
Yeah.
keeps you eating healthy, keeps you drinking water,
Yeah.
that's the kind of self-care that I'm talking about. The things that keep you whole as a
That's
person,
right.
that keeps you connected with yourself, caring for yourself, meeting your own emotional need. That way you're not dependent on what's outside of you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And also cutting off, like you said, putting boundaries up. If
Yes,
it's family, if it's the friend that is just negative and it brings you down, or if
correct.
it's a significant other that's saying naysayer when you're trying to go for a higher thing, or it's just not compatible anymore,
Right.
that is all a part,
Yes,
right, of that mental health, of
correct.
what's not good for you. And something I once heard, tell me if it's fair, if it's not meeting your needs, it's time to reevaluate it.
I would agree.
Whatever your needs are.
Mhm. Mhm. And I'll say this, right? Um, when looking at getting those needs met, if you don't know what the need is, nobody will be able to meet it. So doing that reflective work, it all comes back like hold that mirror up.
Yeah,
Start with the man in the mirror.
that's right. In the words of Mel Robbins, she's gone viral for a book, and I think she's something more of a life coach. But there's
Yeah.
nobody coming.
Come
You
on.
you gotta save you.
Absolutely.
And that starts,
Absolutely.
if it's appropriate, if it's right, that starts with therapy. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a complete and full show. I'm going to let the last comment be from Dr. Hamilton that says, thanks so much, ladies. This conversation was very helpful.
Yay.
It's all about trying to inspire, empower, and motivate and educate here on your award-winning Let's Talk America with host Shana Thornton podcast radio. We intentionally bring on the guests that answer the real questions because I believe in real talk for real people. After all, we're not making a difference if we do not relate to what we all go through in life. And
Right.
family dynamics is real, family trauma is real,
Mhm.
past disappointments is real. And it's all real. It's all real. And it's not necessarily your fault. Okay. But we are in a position now from this program and many other issues and programs out there that there's ways to get help and
Yes.
find your local therapist wherever you are and wherever you need. If it's a medical professional or life coach, whatever it is, get to where you need to be because there's one life. There's nothing else coming, and make the most of it. Live boldly. You're going to make mistakes. People are going to
Yes.
disappoint you. But this is Shayna saying this, Karen. I'm no therapist or life coach, but I'm a person. And I just believe you get up every day and continue. Try your best to live boldly. And you
Yes.
got this.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got this. Greater is coming wherever you are in your life. If you're thinking whatever you're going through, it is coming. So stay fast, get the help, get the healing, make the bold decisions, put those boundaries up.
Yes.
Put those boundaries up because you said it best. It's loving family and friends does not make you a hitting bag for taking it because that's my mom, that's my dad, that's my brother, that's my sister. No one's gonna advocate for you like you, right?
Correct.
I love
Separate the
it.
position from the person.
Mhm. You've got to. And love yourself, as Karen
Yes.
said. Start off with that.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a phenomenal show. We're going to have Karen back on. Do not worry. We are. She's going to go back into the chat afterwards. Check back in with us soon in a few hours or tomorrow morning, and she'll put her website and any other resources that may be helpful for you. You've
Yes.
got this. Let's Talk America with host Shana Thornton offers real talk for real people, and that's you. Stay connected and stay with us, everyone. And if no one has told you this today, I think you're amazing. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.